welcome everybody. My name's Vaughan Klein. I'm the Director of Cisco's collaboration business across Europe, Middle East, Africa and Russia. And it's my absolute delight to welcome you to the start of our Future of Work series. This is going to be rolling out over the next 3 weeks, where we have industry experts who are going to be telling you about what the future of work is going to be like. Obviously, things have significantly changed in recent months as a result of the pandemic, and all of our work styles have changed probably forever. And now's exactly the right opportunity for us to be speaking with you and bringing these experts to the fore so that you can start to strategize and think about and plan for what you're going to be doing with the future of work. Our first speaker is a gentleman by the name of Mike Walsh. Mike is the CEO of Tomorrow. He's a futurist, and he explores the events of 2020 thus far and what sort of change has occurred and what sort of continuing change we expect to see. Mike's actually a fellow Australian. He also resides here in the UK, where I do as well. He's an absolute expert in his field, and I know that you're going to enjoy the next 20 minutes from Mike Walsh on the future of work. Enjoy.
It might seem strange in this time of crisis to be talking about the future of work. And yet, if you now find yourself working at home remotely, or you're temporarily out of work, or you're even overworked by being on the front lines of the coronavirus, there's no doubt that we are currently living through something that is not only life-changing, but profound. For me, things really started to kick off into high gear around March in the United States, when you saw a number of big tech organizations like Microsoft and Facebook and Twitter asking their employees not to come into the office, but if possible to work from home. And around about this time, the head of HR for Twitter made a very interesting observation. She said that after this process, we'll probably never be quite the same again. People who were previously reluctant to work remotely may actually discover that they like it, and more than like it, may not be able to function the old way ever again. Think about that. What does it really mean to say that things will never be the same again? How will the events of 2020 profoundly change the way we engage our customers and clients, the way we design our organizations and teams, and probably critically, what it means to be an effective leader? Well, to understand this, it's helpful to look back in time to the events immediately following the last great pandemic of 1918, the Spanish flu. Now, there was no doubt this was also a global disaster. It infected almost a fifth of the world's population, killing anywhere between 50 to 80 million people. But aside from the terrible human cost, it also had profound implications for the structure of society and our organizations. I mean, you take women. So many men had to leave the workforce that women actually stepped into greater and greater positions of responsibility and authority. And as a result, that set the stage for universal suffrage and their demands for the right to vote. Similarly, there were incredible innovations following that epidemic in terms of the use of data to track disease, the creation of the WHO, innovations in science and technology. Now, of course, I have no idea what this exact device does, or even if it ever worked. But the point is that sometimes these civilization scale events have an incredible impact and an accelerating phenomenon on the technologies around us. Now, this is exactly what's happening today. I mean, from the very early days of the crisis in China, you saw all available technologies being brought to use, whether they were drones or robots or automation or even artificial intelligence being used to rapidly analyze the virus and look for possible treatments. This is more than just hard technology, though. In many ways, you could say that COVID-19 is accelerating the virtualization of the world, the ushering in of an entirely new age. I mean, think about it. This time last year, radiologists were complaining that AI possibly meant the end of their jobs. Now you're seeing radiologists using AI and massive databases of digital CT scans of infected patients to try and train systems to spot coronavirus in scans, something that the naked human eye couldn't do reliably before. So in many ways, this crisis is doing what many CEOs or CTOs or CIOs struggled to do in the past, which is accelerate the push towards a dramatic digital transformation. And if you think about it, there's always been an interesting relationship between crisis and change, between automation and the reinvention and transformation of work. If you look back on the history of crises and collapses, there's always been profound changes afterwards to the way we work and the way we design our businesses. I mean, even just back to 2008. During the financial crash, many people lost their jobs. But interestingly, when the economy started to recover, a lot of those jobs didn't come back. People who'd lost those positions found that those positions were now being done by software, technology, and automation. And this is the great risk in the current crisis we're going through today, because there will be a similar push to use technology and automation to fill the gap. So the only way for us to really survive as human beings in the workforce is going to be to upgrade our skills, to adapt, and to evolve. When you really look at it, job obsolescence isn't as dangerous as when companies go bankrupt, factories stop, farms are emptied out. And this is exactly the scenario we face now, where governments are ordering organizations to shut down because of the risk of the spread of disease. What if we could better leverage automation and robots to keep the factories running, to keep the supply chains moving, to keep the stores open? And human beings, if they can't actually physically work together, could then work remotely using digital twins. When you see it from this perspective, you see that automation isn't the enemy. It is the future of how we need to think about work, which of course brings me to the office. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've talked about the changing nature of offices for some time. In fact, it's kind of been a running joke, which is like flying cars, when are we ever actually going to get the paperless office? Well, we've never had to, is really the point. Because as long as we worked in offices and we had printers, there was always that temptation to print out your emails, to print out your reports, to tell people they have to go to level 5 to talk to procurement, to get your job appraisals done by visiting HR on level 7. In other words, we never really had an incentive to transform until now, when we had no other choice. So by forcing people into working now in a distributed way, we're going to see an acceleration of trends which could have happened 10 years ago but never needed to. But here's something that's worth keeping in mind. I don't believe in the future there'll be any such thing as remote work. There's just going to be work. Because the idea of remote work presupposes that somewhere there is an office where the real work gets done. And that by being at home, that somehow you're remote from the core. And you're out of the loop from where the real activity and value gets created. That's all going to change. Actually, for many organizations, that's always been the case. There's a whole new generation of organization that was in a sense born remote in this, or actually more accurately, they were born distributed because they never had a primary office. And when you look at all of these organizations today, they're really in a very valuable lesson for traditional organizations who suddenly find themselves thrown into the deep end of the pool. When you look closely at the way these organizations work, they've always seen remote as a kind of an opportunity to engage talent in new ways. I mean, look at Stripe. This is an organization that is, in the past, had both offices and remote locations. But if you look on their job posting, you can see there are a number of positions where their location is not important. There are a number of benefits of working in this way. First of all, by working remotely, you open yourself to a much wider pool of talent. Because now you're not just hiring in your region or your city or your country, you can hire people anywhere. This also sets you up for far greater resilience, not just in this current crisis, but if there's any other kind of business interruption, your organization can operate far more effectively and without interruption. By having a remote global workforce, you can operate in multiple time zones, almost a 24/7 global operating model. You have higher levels of productivity. And finally, you have a much easier path to true virtualization. I mean, let's face it, when people are spread across the planet working remotely, suddenly the demands to print out forms for signing or sending documents or complicated silo process arrangements just don't make sense anymore. It accelerates your path to true digital transformation. Of course, when you look at all of this, you realize that for big traditional companies, this is not going to be an easy transition. I'm sure many of you are going through the growing pains of the switch to distributed work right now. It isn't like flipping a light switch. You can't suddenly just become remote. Remote work requires an entirely new cultural operating system. So how do you get there? Well, here are 7 ideas to start you on your journey. Number 1, over-communicate. Communication is the key in the distributed workforce. So if you're not over-communicating, you're not communicating enough. You know, a great example of this in recent days has been what Verizon has been doing. Every day at 12 p.m., the key leaders of Verizon go online and they live stream a message to all of their staff, their partners, and any customers that are interested, basically talking about what the company is doing, what their response to the crisis is, sharing stories about people on the front line, and success stories about why the work that people are doing really matters. If you can't bring people together physically, suddenly on virtual platforms, your ability to tell compelling stories becomes important, not just for people knowing what is going on, but for them to feel engaged and full of purpose as well. Secondly, empower small teams. It's never been more important to avoid bureaucracy and red tape. So by equipping small teams with the authority and power to focus on the projects that really matter, you can ensure that your organization in this time of crisis continues to move forward and innovate. For me, a great example comes from J&J. This was a company I looked at closely when I was researching my current book, The Algorithmic Leader, because I was fascinated about how J&J's Vision Care team used small empowered teams that were globally distributed using the latest collaboration technology to solve issues that really mattered. So one example was that the J&J Vision team wanted to target beauty consumers in Asia. Now this project had been taking way too long, so they created a small global team and they gave them the authority and the budget to act. And then within months, they were able to find solutions and strategies which would have taken the normal organization a considerably longer period of time. Third idea, you have to purposely design your interactions. Now, of course, as you may know, one of the founding principles of agile development is you take a small team co-located in one location and you encourage face-to-face meetings. Now, obviously this no longer works, but can you still have agile methodologies in a distributed workforce? Well, yes, you can, but you have to now think more carefully about the way people meet. So one of the things that Trello does, for example, which is a very successful organization built on distributed work principles, is that they have everyone in their organization, whenever they wake up, depending what time zone that is, record a simple asynchronous stand-up meeting. So in other words, these people go online and they write what they did yesterday, what they're working on today, and whether there's any roadblocks or obstacles for them to getting that done. That simple exercise just allows people, whether they are managers or other team members, to get a sense of what's going on and knowing where they can pitch in and help. As leaders, it becomes very important to think about your communication schedule, especially when people are working from home. When are you going to be doing your one-on-ones? What cadence will you need for checking in or catch-ups? Can you create specialist meetings that allow different teams to sync up to make sure things are continuing to move forward? And can you also make sure that you're having some fun along the way as well? Another key point to think about is that it's important in this time not to micromanage. There's always a temptation, and I think a fear when people are not working in the same building, that you need to constantly check to make sure that they're working. I mean, one of the disastrous features that people are complaining about on some video conferencing platforms, which I won't name, is that they actually check whether or not people are paying attention. And there are other companies that claim to check keystrokes, to check the number of logins, to check whether you're using your VPN. All of these techniques are doomed to fail, because this, if anything, is an opportunity that we finally measure and track people based on outputs rather than on processes. You know, one of the fascinating people I interviewed some time ago was Peter Jacobs, the CIO at the time of ING Bank. Now, ING had gone through a big agile transformation, but one of the reasons that they did it, I found really interesting. It wasn't just that they wanted to emulate the agile structures of companies like Facebook and Spotify and Netflix. When I asked Peter, he said, we did it because of purpose and engagement. He said there's a new generation of talent which is joining our organization who don't want to be micromanaged. So he said, rather than telling them that we need to build a bridge and how to build a bridge, he said, instead we need to tell those people, we need to cross the river. What's your strategy for doing that? So by trusting people to find the right solutions, to giving them the authority to pursue things in their own way, we have the opportunity to finally measure people on what they do, rather than simply whether they turn up on time or they're the last to leave the office. Opportunity number 5. We have to find new team rituals. There are many people in this process that are lonely. They feel isolated. I mean, sure, if you're an introvert, this shift to remote work is like a godsend. But for those of you that are used to social interaction, it's really important as leaders that we find ways to bring people together. You know, in 2016, Ctrip, which was a Chinese travel agency, started to experiment with remote work in their call center. Now, it was so successful, there was such a big jump in productivity, they decided to actually roll it out to the whole organization. Now, that's when things started to go sideways. People started to get unhappy, things started getting messy. And overwhelmingly, when they surveyed their staff, the number one issue that people stated that was the reason for their problems was loneliness. Now, fortunately, building culture online requires new strategies, but it's not impossible. And one of the heartwarming examples I came across this week was Lego. So the engagement team at Lego every afternoon has a virtual coffee where they kind of make things interesting by asking people to wear funny or silly hats. Now, whatever it is for your culture or your company that you choose is up to you. But the point is, the things that brought you together when you were able to be together are exactly what you need to find ways to replicate now that we can only be together online. There's also a great opportunity, and this is my point number 6, to start to now collaborate widely, to bring in new partners. Now that supply chains are under threat, now that silos are looking weakened, this is a great opportunity to start to work and build a broader ecosystem. For me, a great example of this is Dyson. Dyson, in conjunction with TPP, which is the technology partnership, it's a group of scientists in Cambridge, and the British medical regulator, in 10 days were able to design and prepare for mass production a brand new model of ventilator. I mean, the ability to do this so rapidly was only possible, not just because we're in a time of crisis, but because they were able to work broadly with various stakeholders and sources of talent. So use the momentum from this change to transform your culture of working with other organizations and leverage technology to work broader than you normally would. The final piece of advice I would give is that now is the time to democratize data. We have to build a true data-driven culture, because by only building a unified source of truth, we equip people to basically focus on what's really important with the skills and knowledge they need. A great example for me for this is Uber. Francisca Bell, who's the head of data science in Uber, tells this fascinating story where rather than just providing their services to people when they need analysis done, they're spending more and more time building tools to allow people to do the analysis themselves. So for example, forecasting is a tool now they've rolled out to everyone. You can basically take any time series of data or even just cut and paste from Excel, put in this tool and build a complex forecasting model. The ability to increasingly use data in the way we communicate and frame our conversations becomes more important than ever when people are now distributed, and you need to make sure that they're speaking a common language to focus on what really matters. Let me put it all together for you. Here are the 7 pieces of advice. You need to over-communicate. You need to empower small teams. You need to carefully design your interactions. Focus on output, not process. Reimagine your team rituals. Collaborate widely. And finally, democratize your data. What you need to realize is that this remote work revolution is just the beginning of a much broader transformation that's ultimately going to change the nature of work itself, the design of our organizations, and what it takes to be an effective leader. This is the dawn of a new age. It is the dawn of the algorithmic age, in which AI, algorithms, and automation will change the very structure of our world and society. So what should you do today about it? Well, my advice is that you need to start thinking carefully about a digital curriculum to make sure that your distributed workforce, that your leaders and teams have the skills and capabilities that they need to work effectively in this new environment, but also that they're ready for this new world in which algorithms and data will be crucial to effective decision making. Before I go, I also want to give you what I call a mind grenade. It's like a challenge question. You might want to pose it on your WebEx Teams chat or just talk to your colleagues about it. But think about this. How does your leadership style need to change when there's no longer anyone around physically for you to lead anymore? Let me put this into context by going back to a theme that I started with. We are absolutely living now through a civilization scale event that has profound implications, not just for how we work, but how we live. If you go back to the Black Death in the 14th century, a similar pandemic which had devastating human consequences, that also had the silver lining of transforming that society and preparing it for something far greater that was to come. It led to the greater use of labor-saving technologies, the dispersal of technical knowledge, the breakdown in feudalism, which ultimately set the stage for the Italian Renaissance. So what will be our Renaissance this time? How will this crisis change our world? Well, ultimately, that's up to us. We have to reinvent how we engage our customers, our clients, and our communities. We have to rethink how and where we work. And ultimately, we have to reimagine what it takes to be an effective leader. Because now, more than ever, is time for transformation. Thank you very much.
Well, that was Mike Walsh with his insights and vision about the future of work. I hope you enjoyed it. Next up, we have Michael Bush. Michael's the CEO of A Great Place to Work. Michael and I were sharing the stage at a Cisco Workplace Transformation event in London in January. But January seems like a lifetime ago now. A Great Place to Work independently surveys employees from around the world. And from that information, they then rate organisations on which are, in fact, the greatest places to work. We're very, very thankful and we're honoured that Cisco was actually nominated as the #1 great place to work in all of the world. Michael's going to share with us the insights on what it takes for your organisations to also be a great place to work. I'm sure you'll enjoy this session. Over to Michael.
So today I'm going to talk a little bit about becoming a great place to work for all, what it means, and particularly what it means today, as we've got increasing people all around the world doing more work remotely. So when we talk about being a great place to work for all, it enables us to pursue our mission, which is to help organizations become great places to work for all by 2030, mainly because organizations need to get everything they can from everybody who is working for them and working with them. And when we talk about being a great place to work for all, we think it should be a great place to work if you have no hair. We think it should be a great place to work if you have gray hair. We think it should be a great place to work if you have uniquely beautiful hair. And we think it should be a great place to work if, because of what you believe in, you choose to cover your uniquely beautiful hair. And we think it should be a great place to work if you're differently abled or you have someone in your family who is differently abled. So when we say great place to work, we mean great place to work for all. And the thing that we know about that is it all comes from the data and analytics that we collect. We do survey work in 98 countries, 10 million employees every year, and over 10,000 companies. So we know a lot about working people. And we work to quantify your culture so you understand what's going on with your workforce so you can help them have a great experience, because that's going to be best for your business. Things have changed. As we know, data is the new oil. A billion hours ago, Homo sapiens emerged. A billion minutes ago, Christianity began. A billion seconds ago, the first PC was released. And a billion Google searches ago was early this morning. So things have changed, but what hasn't changed is how we need to treat one another as we move through this digital transformation. All of our work is built on trust, something that we've been measuring for over 30 years. So the things that we look at, the things we measure when determining whether or not a place is a great place to work for all, is we look at the purpose and the values of the organization, and we ask a series of questions to determine whether or not employees are actually experiencing this purpose, connect with this purpose, and whether the values are part of their day-to-day experience. We also measure leadership effectiveness because leaders actually affect about 70% of the employee's work experience. So leadership is really, really important. And when we measure leadership, we measure whether or not employees feel respected by the person that they work for. We measure whether or not employees think that their leader is credible, transparent, and is telling the truth. And we measure the most important factor of all, which is whether or not employees feel that their leader is fair. Employees think this is the most important factor of all. If a leader treats everyone with equal disrespect, employees will actually say that's fair. So what they're hoping for is not equal disrespect, but to be treated the same as everyone else, regardless of who they are or what they do in the organization. People all want the same thing. We measure these metrics in 98 countries. People want to enjoy the people that they work with, and people want to have pride in their work, which means they really care about their work, which means they care about the people they work with, and they feel the people that they work with care about them as well. And you put these things together and it creates this sense of what we call camaraderie, this sense of team. And teams are important because teams are the way that work gets done. We also measure maximizing human potential, which is our way of comparing different demographic groups to make sure it's a great place to work for all. So we look at senior executives in the company, we look at middle managers and people on the front lines, perhaps doing work directly with customers, and we compare the work experiences. And in our work, where we do recognize companies for being great, we reward the companies that are having the same great experience, regardless of where you happen to be in an organization. Because when that's happening, you get what we call innovation by all, which we also measure, which is everyone in the workforce bringing their full selves because they feel emotionally and psychologically safe to the work. What does that do? Well, we take a look at our companies that we've been doing work with over 20 years, and we actually measure places that we call great places to work and their financial returns. In this case, publicly traded companies and their stock performance. If you look at companies that we call great places to work and you compare them to the market, their performance is 3 times that of the Russell 2000 and the Russell 1000 and the Russell 3000. So all these metrics, 3 times return, which proves if you're a great place to work, you're going to be an outstanding financial performer. Back to leadership effectiveness, the most important component. Every leader has a chart like this, meaning that the area of blue shows the number of people that are having a positive experience working for that leader. And then there's the employees that are in the gray area, which we call neutral. They're having a neutral experience, which means sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. And then we have employees that are in the black shaded area, which these employees are having a consistently negative experience. So this is true for every leader. Most leaders think that their pie chart is all blue. We haven't met one yet. So all leaders are working to develop to try and get as much blue as possible in their charts. And this actually shows leadership, and we know this because we survey about 3 million leaders every year, and we analyze the analytics and have found that on the far left, you have leaders that actually create friction, which is they're developing, they're not really creating a consistently great experience for over half the people. Then we have leaders right in the middle, that 62% of them are providing an outstanding experience, and they're developing and working on the rest. And then we have leaders on the far right, which are providing an accelerated experience, which people are having a great experience. So you can feel the difference if you're working for somebody that's on the right, and you can imagine the difference if you're working for leaders who are on the left. And the idea here is every leader moving to the right is the overall idea. Because if not, and employees are not having a great experience, then they're filled with fear. And fear separates people into groups that actually have similar hopes and fears. So you'll have the IT group coming together to talk about the accounting group. And you'll have the accounting group, people in it coming together talking about manufacturing or production. You end up getting these silos, which are actually the attractive part of the silo is having similar hopes or similar fears. That's bad for the company. It stops inclusion when you need it most. It stops innovation, which every company needs really badly right now. And it makes people think small. They are really just trying to protect their budget or their small part of the company rather than thinking about how to make the pie bigger. So every leader's job is to be thinking about this, getting information which comes from surveying employees, and finding a way to prove that the way that they lead. The leaders on the right, people say things like this in the open comments. I stay here because of my manager, which they're just having a phenomenal experience. And then the for-all leader, the top-level leader, is the leader that people say, this leader cares about me as a person, and they have my best interest in mind as they're making decisions. And at complex times like this is really, really important. Because when that's happening, people feel safe. And we measure this, the level of emotional, psychological, and physical safety in the workplace. When people feel safe, they trust the people they work with, and more importantly, they trust the person that they work for. And then when the company needs something aggressive or really ambitious to happen, then they come together, they are adaptive and agile, they move very quickly, and they believe, why increase things 3% when we can increase them 30%? This is what we want. The other thing that becomes real is that people have a sense and they feel like they belong, like they're valued, they're cared for. No matter where they work around the world, if they're working through a screen, they feel like they matter, and they are getting a sense from the employee, from the person that they work for, that they're a high performer. And they like to be around people who are having the same kind of experience. The opposite is when people don't feel like they belong. And that happens more when they're working for leaders that were on the left side of the graphic, where they feel anxious or isolated really bad right now with this movement towards remote work. There's a way for people to work remotely and yet not feel isolated, which is a way of connecting with them through the technology in a way that is human, rather than just issuing orders through the technology. Because when this happens, people actually, when they don't feel like they belong, they stop taking care of themselves. And you can actually see it. These are the remote workers who sit down at 6 a.m. and don't leave their chair until 9 p.m. That happens, and it happens a lot. But these are people who, for some reason, just aren't having a great experience. So they don't have healthy habits like taking a break, taking a walk, interacting with their pet or their child while they're at home. They don't do these things that are healthy, and sooner or later, they're going to burn out. But you can have great companies. This happens to be a graphic that comes from Cisco's data, which we measure the percentage of employees that are having a great experience compared to those that aren't. And this is our accelerated ratio. The highest scores you're going to get are scores like this, where you've got double digits versus a single digit. This is 11-2. So it shows that when you've got 77,000 people working in 170 countries, you still have this kind of a ratio, which is phenomenal. This is what every company wants, which is people who are ready to go to work and innovate on behalf of their customers. And we actually recognize companies and measure and score to let the world know about what it is to be a great company, to inspire more companies to be great. This happens to be a graphic that shows Cisco's movement over time in terms of being one of the best in the world. And in 2019, they actually got the #1 spot. And this is surveying over 10,000 companies, so it's not easy. That's why I use Everest as the graphic. It's not easy to do, but Cisco has achieved that. And what they get are badges like this that they get to tell the world about. And this kind of diversity, to be a great place to work for millennials, a great place to work for women, best place to work for technology, and then companies that care, which is all about the good that the organization does in the world, and then being on the Fortune 100 best places to work in the United States, as well as #1 in the world. There's only one company that's achieved that. That's Cisco. So it's just good for you to know, especially as you're thinking about and working with a company like Cisco. And back to the analytics, these are the kinds of things we measure. Just in case you're wondering, well, how do we know? Well, these are actually Cisco scores compared to the 100 best companies in the world. So in these areas like right in the middle, this is an emotionally and psychologically great place to work or healthy place to work. Cisco's at 87. The top 10 in the world are at 81. So this just shows why they were number one effectively. Managers avoid playing favorites. Everybody has an opportunity to get special recognition. People are paid fairly for the work that they do. And I'm able to take time off work when I think that it's necessary. These are the kinds of things that people care about to know that the organization feels like they're cared for as a person. As we look at what's going on right now and this abrupt shift that no one could have anticipated, before COVID-19, only 7% of US firms were offering telecommuting. Seems crazy now, but that's a fact. Remote work has just been moving along at 10% a year, yet for the companies that we work with at Great Place to Work, 4 out of 5 companies offer telecommuting. So we actually have the data to show when you offer telecommuting, you're actually a better place to work. You're creating a better experience for your employees. So now, March 2020, tens of millions of Americans and people around the world have been thrust into this new world, which is causing them to set up home offices on the fly. And where people work, we have the data to prove it, isn't as important as how they work. People think that, well, if you work remotely, you can't collaborate and innovate. Cisco and other great companies have proved that's absolutely false. We see highly performing workplaces, many of whom are fully remote, and certainly fully remote today. And we know it's possible to build trusting, collaborative, innovative workplaces that are partially or fully remote. And companies that offer telecommuting are 30% more innovative than those that don't. So wherever people work, they need to feel safe, supported, and connected. That's the key. So these are the kinds of things we ask companies. Does your organization provide the resources that you need? Does your organization communicate with you frequently? And do you experience a high level of care and compassion? And we look at this statistic, particularly for people who are working remotely, to let companies know that they have some work to do, or to let companies know, continue doing what you're doing. So what's key here? Well, the key is what you're experiencing right now. Using video technology that fuels online communication with screen sharing, meeting recording, and other productivity apps like chats, etc. This is what's needed. If you don't have one of those parts, it really makes it so the technology can't be reliable. So some other best practices, stay on video. So it's important to set up a norm that, look, if you have a bad hair day, we want to see it. And we're not going to judge you for it. Seeing people really, really matters, because 55% of communication and the way we communicate with one another is nonverbal. So video really matters. The other thing is getting your virtual water cooler set up. There are companies, especially now, who are having these times of day all around the clock, 24 hours, where people can know they can log in, get onto the technology, and meet other people for a casual, unstructured conversation. Also have to assume good intent. Just because you don't know where your workers are physically doesn't mean you can't trust them. And you don't want to have a 6 a.m. call to see how people are doing, where you're really managing productivity and you want to make sure people are working at 6 a.m. These are the things that employees don't want, and they particularly don't appreciate right now, when they need to know that you care about them as a person more than at any other time in their working careers. So set some standards, some ground rules, like no apologizing for kids, pets, or partners. When people are on video and a kid comes in or a pet comes in, you don't have to apologize. This is the way that we're working, and I believe it's the way we're going to be working as we go forward. Also, just because you're working through the technology doesn't mean you can't open and close a meeting by asking people how you're doing. Can you share an interesting anecdote about what's going on in your family right now? It's not a time to be a therapist. You don't have to respond or solve anyone's problem. Just make sure you start every meeting with humanity first, and if you can, close it that way as well. And embracing individuality, people having, I have Yoda nearby. So people should be able to do that and encourage that and have a good time with that. And also be disciplined and unplugging. Anybody that's going to sit in front of their screen all day long, every day, they're just not going to do that well. So you want to encourage people to take a little break in the morning, take a little break in the afternoon, just like people would normally do in a structured workplace. So what we're talking about, especially in this remote movement, is raising the leadership bar, making sure leaders are creating a high trust experience for their people. And we have to get rid of this statement that we hear all too often. They're a great leader, but they're not very good with people. When you see it in writing, it reads really crazy, but people say it all the time. So we have to have a way of treating people in a human way. It doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert, you can care about people and make sure people know through communication, and video helps, that you care about them. Because the for-all leader, that leader on the far right, is working to continuously improve. The for-all leader knows that there are things that they need to be doing to create a stronger connection with the people who work for them. Because the job of the for-all leader is to maximize the human potential of everyone. The way to be number one in the world is to have leaders who are for-all leaders that are maximizing the potential of everyone. Leaders who feel that every person is just like this. Right when you think they're done, they're not done. They continue to grow, and they look for opportunities to get promoted. They want feedback. They want to be developed. They want to be treated fairly and equally. That's what everyone wants, and for-all leaders make sure that that's actually happening. Why? Because the organization's purpose is worth changing for. That's why leaders change. Compensation doesn't do it. Stock options doesn't do it. Not in a way that's sustainable. It's because leaders are driven by a sense of purpose of what the organization can do and what it can do in society, and the employees feel the same powerful mission. It's not easy. It's not for everybody. A lot of people think about climbing Everest, but very few people actually do it. But when you do, and you do it together, it's better for business. We've proven that. It's better for people, and it's better for the world.
Well, that was Michael Bush sharing with us his insights on what we can all do to make our own organisations a great place to work. Next up, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Keith Griffin. He's a friend of mine. We've been working here at Cisco together for well over 10 years. Keith is a distinguished engineer, and he holds the most number of patents for collaboration technology in Cisco. And today, he's going to share with you what's important about your collaboration technology platform and how that can support Mike Walsh's vision of the future and Michael Bush's organizational best practice. Thanks very much, Keith. Over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Keith Griffin. I'm a distinguished engineer in the Office of CTO in the Collaboration Group, and I want to talk to you about workplace of the future. Workplace of the future is an interesting concept at the moment. There's always a future workplace. As far back as I've worked in the collaboration industry, there's always been the next type of workplace challenges. And in the last few months, we've clearly faced a lot of working challenges with people working remotely, working from home, and now we're starting to see some limited return to office environments. And the question on everybody's mind is, what's the next normal? What's the next way of working? We've been busy reimagining employee IT management and also customer experiences as we look at this. We've been in a good position that we've a lot of baseline technology that we've been able to repurpose, or innovation that we've been able to accelerate. And when I was preparing for this presentation originally, I thought I was going to talk to you about much further out features, but like I said, we've been able to accelerate a lot of those. So much of what I'll cover today is actually already available or coming very soon, and hopefully you'll get some benefit from hearing about it. And what we've learned more so than ever in the last few months is that work can happen anywhere, and work is what you do, what you produce, not where you go or where you are. So whether you're working from home, whether you're working on the go, as we're starting to see a bit more mobility and people moving around right now, or whether you're working in an office, as you can see, I'm working in my office environment. I'm probably the only person in the building doing that right now. But as we see that combination of different work environments happen, it really is about enabling you and enabling your users to focus on what it is they do and not necessarily where they are. And a big part of the technology that I want to talk to you about today is really about minimizing distraction and making it okay to work from wherever it is you happen to be, to be able to get that work done. We've created a blueprint for the hybrid workplace as well, and that is really focused on looking at how we empower the remote worker, how we enable those safe returns to the office that I've just mentioned, how we apply intelligence to build exceptional customer experiences, and also the fourth pillar of how we manage that experience and how we allow for IT admins to easily manage and also to get insights into your collaboration needs. For today, I'm going to focus mostly on empowering the remote worker and in the context of remote and homework, and also in the context of returning to the office, so that hybrid between the remote worker and the person that is back in the office. And a goal that we've set ourselves is to do this and to deliver a 10 times better experience than being there. And that's quite a lofty goal. It's not too long ago since we were focusing on a better than being there experience. So focusing on 10 times better than being there brings a lot of technical challenge, and we really need to solve for problems that that exist when people are in these distributed or remote environments. And also, there's a lot of new problems that popped up as everybody worked remotely during this global pandemic. That might be for solving for the dog barking or interrupting on a call, to modifying how your background looks and how you present yourself in a meeting. There's so many different challenges that are there to be solved, and we have very good solutions for many of those that move towards that 10 times better than being there experience. And we should also consider that when we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about more than just meetings. Obviously, a lot of work gets done in meetings and a lot of meetings happen, but you can get work done by simply calling somebody, by messaging, by sharing content and collaborating on that. And with that in mind, there's three areas that we focused on. The first is the unified app for uninterrupted workflows and productivity. Next, which is the main topic that I want to cover in the rest of this session, is WebEx intelligence. And our focus here is to really increase productivity and remove mundane tasks, as well as minimizing distractions, like I mentioned already. And then finally, to have a single pane of glass management. So being able to manage and get analytics and diagnostics for IT admins so that you can provide better experiences to the end users of the collaboration platform. Before we get into looking at some of those intelligent experiences and how we reduce that distraction, I just wanted to provide some orientation on how we think about WebEx intelligence or cognitive collaboration. For us, that's been a 4-pillar strategy. It's focused on relationship intelligence, such as people profiles, bringing briefings and information into the meeting about who you're meeting with. And as we're all predominantly remote right now, that's really important. It's really important that we can connect with people. Next is audio and speech technologies. This is really focused on how we make speech and audio better, improving quality, looking at noise removal, looking at speech integration and meeting transcription from a productivity perspective. So, removing the need to take meeting notes by having a speech engine transcribe what's happening in the meeting. And related to that is the application of speech technologies to bots and assistants. So having an in-meeting assistant with WebEx Assistant accessible in the meeting or via a device. Also having things like a proactive mode, so that when you return to an office environment, that the system can ask you, are you ready to join your meeting? And there's no need to interact with anything, no touching a glass screen or a panel or anything like that, simply speaking to the system or having it speak to you to validate what you want to do. And then finally, the pillar of computer vision. So using the intelligence from the camera and video feed to do things like detect faces, recognize people, apply name labels and titles so that you can know who you're interacting with, address people in a more personable way by their name, even if it's a first time meeting them. Having those small cues and reminders in meetings are often subtle but very important intelligent experiences. So let's dive into some of those in some detail. What you're seeing on the right-hand side here is some people briefing and meeting briefing information scrolling through that's informing us about who we're meeting with. And we're also seeing some of that cross-functional capability, like you can see face recognition, you can see the name label also coming from the briefing information. It's bringing in the meeting titles, so you know who you're dealing with and what role they're in while you're in that meeting. And that's an example of some of the different cognitive capabilities working together. And of course, to start the meeting in the first place, that can be done in a zero-touch way. It could be done by speaking to the system, or like I mentioned with proactive mode, having the system say, hey Keith, your meeting is about to start, would you like me to join? And I can just join the meeting in that way, or using our intelligent proximity to, from my mobile device, just pair with my Cisco WebEx device and join the meeting right away, again, without having to interact with the device if I'm in a conference room setting or simply from home. It just makes it easier and more simple to join the meeting. And for me personally, it makes it so that I'm on time more often, because I can have the assistant go set the meeting up and join rather than and focus on the briefing rather than waiting till I'm done with all of that before actually clicking on the join button. Another aspect of WebEx Intelligence is looking at intelligent room capacity. So there's a very interesting blog that was published on this a couple of months ago. The URL for that is on the slide here, and it's about how we can return to work with intelligent room capacity. What that's doing is using an API that exposes the people count, the count of the number of people that are in a given space, which you can then compare with your directory or any social distancing constraints that you might have in your organization. And what it can do is then notify perhaps cleaners that the space should be cleaned if it's just been used, or for a contact tracing or a traceability perspective, you could also implement that type of functionality. But rather than show it to you on a slide, let me just stop the share here and just go big on video. And what I'm going to do is just enable here the diagnostics, the speaker track diagnostics on my device, so that you can see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture here is showing you the rest of the office, not just this best intelligent view that was decided by the system. You're also seeing the detection of my face, as well as the name label that's on here that is determining who I am. And up here in this side, you can see the people count, and it's showing there's one person in this space. Now, I'm quite tall. I'm 6'4", about 192 centimeters, I think that is. And if I give you a full wingspan here, I'm using up most of the room. So there is one more seat here, and the room is big enough that we could take one more person. But if there were 3 people detected here, then I would be going against the guidelines that have been published in terms of safety and social distancing right now. So what was shown on the previous slide is an example of how we were very quickly able to pivot from a feature that was designed for room utilization and productivity, but we were very quickly able to pivot and provide that API, which allows now for to solve a use case which is now focused more on health and safety and having people work safely back in their working environment. So let me just disable this diagnostics mode, and while I'm doing that, and while I'm not sharing the slides, what I'll do is just show you an additional feature here, which relates also to removing distraction. So let's say I'm concerned about what I've got on my whiteboard right now. Well, what I could simply do is blur that background. And when I apply the blur effect, you can no longer read what's on the whiteboard, or you can no longer read the obscured view that's shown on the patent plaques that are behind me. But at the same time, you can see my outline, and I'm in the foreground, and that's all managed very accurately. But let's say I'm working in my often very messy home environment, which is part home office, part gym, and I want to just simply not show the background at all. then I can enable background replacement, and of course we could choose various different types of backgrounds. And again, the entire background is gone, and it does that in quite an accurate way, allowing me to again remove that distraction. Sometimes it's nice if I'm in my home office, which is like as I mentioned, is partly a gym environment. People may ask about exercise or ask about cycling or something like that, and it can be a topic of conversation. But largely, I just want to hide it and be professional and get on with the task that we're doing. So if I'm in an environment where I just don't want that background to see, I can simply enable that. And of course, that's not just from the device that's here. If I'm joining through a WebEx Meetings client on a desktop or a soft phone, that's something. On a soft client, I should say, on a smartphone or desktop, that's something that works across the portfolio as well. So important to consider that. So let's go back to the material, and give me one moment. So we'll just go back to the slides here and move on. One more thing very relevant to what I was just about to do is if we were in a normal meeting environment rather than a recording right now, I would probably have said, hey, can everybody see my screen again? Well, we really wanted to solve that problem, and what we've created is a sharing view so that you as a user can see a preview of what everybody else is seeing. So you no longer have to say, can everybody see my share, or can everybody see my screen? Because if you can see it, they can see it. And that just removes that, again, very subtle, very small time saving in a meeting. But when you add up all of these things, the distractions, the questions that are frequently asked, and the comments that people make, like, can you see my screen? It all adds up, and it ends up with a significant saving in distraction. Something else that results in a significant saving in time and effort is not having to take notes at meetings. This is one of my favorite features for that reason alone, but also because the technology behind it is really phenomenal. It builds on WebEx Assistant, which we initially launched through our devices based on the acquisition of MindMeld, a conversational AI platform, and adds to it with the transcription capabilities from our acquisition of Voicea, which allows for meeting note-taking, live captions, as you're seeing on the slide here, as well as notes and highlights that are shown on the right-hand panel. And of course, these are searchable. So it's often the case, given the time zone, I'm based in Ireland, so working in a global role, it's often the case that I will miss a meeting that's late at night. I can simply have that meeting recorded. If I didn't have time for the meeting, probably I don't have time for the recording, but I can look at the highlights and look at outcomes from that meeting. And it means that, I don't need to suffer from that fear of missing out. I can still follow up on that very rapidly the next day or later in the same day, depending on what my schedule is like. So an extremely useful feature, regardless of whether you are the remote worker or in an office environment. It's something that really brings a lot of use, a lot of efficiency, I should say, in terms of use case to the user. And then my new favorite feature, something I've been working on very hard recently, is our recent announcement with the intent to acquire Babel Labs, which is a noise removal technology company. I'd encourage you to go and read the Javad's blog on it to find out some more details. And what Babel Labs do is they distinguish human voice from background noise using machine learning and AI. It's a really impressive feature. It's something that actually, let me just show it to you. It's late here as I'm recording this right now, late in the evening, so it's well past my lunchtime. But let's say I was eating, from a plastic bag. I had some food in this. Let's pretend that that's the case. You can hear the noise that's bringing out. Now, if I enable noise removal right now, as you're seeing the noise happen, but you should no longer be hearing that noise. And if I disable it, now, then you should hear that noise again. So it's pretty amazing technology. Works across a range of those common noises you would encounter. Like imagine a loud keyboard clicks. Again, you're hearing that right now. If I enable the feature and I speak, that noise is removed. If I disable it again and turn that off, then you can hear the difference in the effect. So really impressive technology when it comes to removing that distraction and allowing the meeting to go on, or simply allowing work to go on without somebody having to be asked to go on mute, and the whole session has to pause while that happens, and then we get on with what we're doing. A lot of these, like I mentioned several times, are very subtle features. They're very small gains, but they're gains that add up over the meeting and over the day and over the week, and really help with empowering the remote user and those that are in that hybrid scenario that I mentioned earlier. And before moving on from Babel Labs, you can see this on their website, but it's remarkably impressive progress that they've made using the industry standard PESC score from the ITU. You can see just some of the test result output that they've had when you compare decades of noise removal technology and improvements towards the just remarkable improvement that they've had in the last few years since starting the company. The acquisition is still not closed, so you'll hear more from us in the future about this, but I wanted to share just some of the impact that technology could have in terms of empowering remote workers and also helping with return to office for that hybrid model that I shared earlier. So that's just one of many very exciting WebEx intelligence features that we're bringing to the future of work. And like I said at the very beginning, that future is very, very near. Many of the features, in fact, I'm tempted to say all, but many of those features are already available to you, and the rest, such as the noise removal, are coming very, very soon. So stay posted, and hopefully this was a useful session for you to see some of the things that we're thinking about in the not too distant future.
Well, that was Dr. Keith Griffin sharing his thought leader insights on the future of work. Thankfully, that's not the last that we'll hear from Keith, because in fact, he'll be joining us again on Thursday as our Future of Work series continues. On Thursday, we'll be discussing what Cisco did as it entered into the pandemic. We have our senior executives from facilities, from HR, and from IT coming together to describe what we did to enable 70,000 people to go home and commence working within a 48-hour time period. There's a lot to learn from that. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Please join us again on Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you again then. Thanks so much.
Okay, give it a try.
Between wisdom and curiosity, there's a bridge. Between ideas and inspiration, trauma and treatment.
Gained a couple of more pounds since last time.
That's good for the baby.
Between the people and their leaders.
How's the hospital? It's been very busy. It was busier today than yesterday.
When are you gonna come back?
Collaboration.
And we have in the center.
And creativity.
You don't want that sketch to compete with the image.
Between the moments that make us who we are and keeping them safe, private,
That's great.
and secure, there's WebEx.